Welcome, beautiful friends, to the Way of Mastery, Lesson 7B. Wow, it's been a month since beep boop. I got to get back in the swing of this. Channeling love, I've been out of practice for a month. I've been doing it all inwardly by myself. I haven't been speaking it. Welcome back. We've taken a month off, some of which was planned, some of which came as a wee bit of a surprise. But I am really, really excited to be back tonight. I've sent out a little bit of brief kind of on some of the stuff that I was experiencing. I couldn't even put it in context for me to understand. It's part of what's been happening. So there's not a hope to share it in any kind of words. But Jeshua assures me that everyone gets it all anyway. It all, there's no, I get receipt of no package that is not delivered for all of us, and vice versa. It's one mind. We're all waking up. So everything that has come will, of course, be shared energetically or within the one mind, however that works. But it's really great to have you all back. So we're going to dive right in. You ready, Cindy? Thank you for putting up with me with a month with no events. Well, yeah, we're all at it. Maybe we should have done a dress rehearsal last night with nobody here.
Okay, now I'm ready. I am created as my Father created me to be. I am free, and nothing sources my experience but me in each moment. Nothing has an effect on me whatsoever, save that which I choose to allow to affect me. I need do nothing. I do not live any ordinary moments. With each breath, my experiences are the stepping stones laid before me of God to guide me home. Therefore, I will bring awareness to each moment and allow it to teach me how to forgive, how to embrace, how to love, and therefore, how to live fully. The only relationship which holds any value at all is your relationship with God, your creative source. And the keys to the kingdom: desire, intention, allowance, and surrender. The definition of love: love allows all things, accepts all things, trusts all things, embraces all things, and is therefore transcendent of all things.
Thank you, Cindy. So number one tonight, I'm going to pull out nothing has an effect on me. Well, this whole pathway is transitioning from the little m, me, to the big M. Well, it's not really a me, it's just an I at that point. But as we transition from little I to big I, which is what we're all going through, and each one of us can attest to the fact that there's something that used to affect you that no longer seems to affect you. It happens and you're like, wow, I can't believe that. I used to get really bent out of shape about this, but not now. Woohoo! I'm free of that. Doesn't that feel good? We can all appreciate that. Well, that's what we're moving to, except that when we become one with the big I, nothing whatsoever can ever have an effect on you. Because everything will be arising by choice within you, coming for your celebration and your embrace. Number two, I need do nothing. Well, we need do nothing because God created us. We didn't create ourselves. We don't have to do anything. God's done it already. What we have to drop is the idea that we need to do something, like God needs help with creation. God created us. We remain as He created us. We need do nothing. We didn't make the truth true, nor does anything we do enhance its truth. It already is. All we really need to do is stop all our denial, which largely is a bunch of spiritual seeking for most of us. Because, of course, that arises out of this belief, I do need to do something. I need to listen to that channeling 3 times this week. So just know that when you're doing those, just hold them really gently. Be willing to let them go at any moment that you realize, I really need do nothing. Number 3, how to embrace. The world's taught us nothing about divine embrace. It's taught us to measure and be cautious and don't be vulnerable and only embrace under certain conditions, but be prepared to make a quick exit at any point. Whether it's a potential relationship that we're getting in or getting out of, or it's a potential law being passed, or it's a potential candidate running for office, or it's maybe the potential forecast of the weather. The point is, the world has taught us nothing about embrace because we have been guarded about everything. He's going to talk about it in love, and we're going to get to it in this lesson, about the nature of what divine embrace is. If you can see it, if you can feel it, if you can experience it in any way, God is already embracing what that is, or it wouldn't exist. I wonder if we just might join God in an unconditional embrace of all that is. If we want to wake up to our all that isness, we might start by saying, I'm willing to embrace all that is. Because if we're not willing to, we're really denying our own divinity. So I welcome you to reconsider the conditions under which you embrace. Number 4, God is our creative source. This comes as a devastating blow to the ego when you finally realize that of yourself, you can do absolutely nothing. You don't have a lick of independent creativity. We love to claim it as our own, but there's one source and everything comes from that source. Whatever skill, whatever talent, whatever gift, whatever everything, those aren't ours. Part of our ego is that we make those our possessions. They're really simply gifts from the creative source given to us to express that source. But we claim them as our own. And that's one other thing that gets washed away in our pathway to awakening, is this whole idea that you could possess anything. You'll come to rest in extraordinary joy that you are God's possession, and that's it. When Jeshua said in the Bible, ye too are gods, it's a beautiful play on words, because you're God's, meaning you're the expression of the Creator and you're creating, but you're also God's as in you are God's possession. We don't have any possessions. But if you look at those that you claim are your possessions, there's a whole lot of fear around protecting them or potentially losing them. When you finally realize it's all God and you're God's and everyone else is God's, you really get to rest about possessions. You stop striving for them, you stop seeking them, and you sure don't give any exercise to trying to protect them. The keys to the kingdom, allowance, he says, is the very most important one, and this goes back to embrace. We don't know how to allow, do we? Again, we do it only under what we would deem to be the proper conditions, based on what our past has taught us. How many of us have experienced something in our lives which we would have chosen not to allow, only to realize later the extraordinary gift of grace that it was? We've all had those experiences. When do those experiences mean enough to us that we live in the knowing that this is going to be grace-filled, rather than living in the denial of allowance? Because we've all got the examples. How is it we still default to this fear position? What if we lived in that knowing, you know what, it always works out. I'm still here despite everything that ever happened. Everything I was sure was going to kill me, everything I'm sure was going to embarrass or humiliate me off the face of the planet, boom, I'm still here. And love allows all things, accepts, trusts, embraces, and is transcendent. We're all after this transcendent part. That's what everybody wants. Well, we get there by learning to allow. We don't know how to allow. By learning to accept. We don't know how to accept. By learning to trust. We have no idea what trust is unless it's proven to us first, and then we only give it potentially, you know what I mean? And we certainly don't know how to embrace. So this pathway is about re-correcting our minds, re-correcting our beings into our very natural transcendent state, which effortlessly allows, without thinking allows. accepts without considering options, without judgment, without weighing potentials, accepts. Trusts because that's just what it is. Untrust to love makes no sense at all. This whole dream was our idea to try and make something untrusting. And embrace. And embrace is the last one because that's the last threshold we come over to experience the transcendence. And then when we have the transcendence, it's of all things. All things. He's going to talk about that tonight in the lesson, but we become transcendent of all things. Nothing can touch what you are, what I am, what we are, what is. So tonight on the Lord's Prayer, we're going to do one of Jeshua channeling the Lord's Prayer through JM, and then we're going to do Jen Stackpole's version of her singing it, which she sang here a little over a month ago, maybe 5 or 6 weeks ago. So just sit back and relax. There are a couple of news folks here. If you haven't heard this before, be glad that you don't know what it means. There's a translation over there on the other side of the fireplace if you want to take one home. Those watching online, it's on the website if you want to go look. The English translation of Yeshua's Aramaic Lord's Prayer, it's very, very different than the one we grew up with. Very, very different because it's a now experience. It's not this God's in heaven out there and kingdom come, thy way. It's all about now and present.
Avun, the Boshmaya, Nita Kadash Shamach, Tete Malkuda, Neve Sivinach, Akina the Boshmaya O Baraha, Haulan Lachman, Zunkanan Yaumana, Boshwoklan Halpain, Akina Dapanan, Shwakin Il Hayabain, Ula Talan Il Nisyon, El Pasan Mbisha, Matal de Lachim El Kuta, Uhaila, Utish Bokta, La Alam, Amen. Amen.
Abun de Boshmaya, Nita Kedash Shama, Tete Makuta, Nwere Savianek, Canada Boshmaya of Barahar. How long Lachmad Sunkan in Yamana Washwoklan Habain I Canada Dafbanan Shwaken El Hayabain Ula Talan Desiona ela person min bisha metal de la kimakuta uhaila utishbokta la alam Amen. Amen.
That rocks. I can feel Jen. She's out there watching tonight. I can feel her, a twinge of embarrassment. Jen, let that go. We're all loving your rendition of the Lord's Prayer, hearing you sing love. So here we go. Just a reminder, if something strikes you as really serious, it's very easy to discern that that's the ego. Because remember, that which can be affected by nothing can't experience fear, can't take anything seriously. So if there's a part of you taking it really seriously, it's really easy to discern that's the ego. You can just set it down. You don't need to evaluate it. You don't need to get in there and figure it out. Just set it down. So you ready, Cindy?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, here we go.
Each sane moment that you've experienced, each moment of unlimitedness, each moment of genuine intimacy, each moment of grace-filled joy that you've known, in whatever form it seems to appear or be bottled before you, has come because you've allowed your mind to slip into the sea of peace. And you've merely abided, empty, wanting nothing, seeking nothing, merely the presence of what you are. And when that quality becomes cultivated so that it permeates your consciousness with each breath and with each moment, you will know that Christ has indeed arisen this day, and you'll celebrate Easter with each breath. What then could ever possibly arise to obstruct the truth that is true always? There is an ancient forest somewhere on your planet, a forest high in a rugged mountain valley, so rugged that no one has ever been there. Unknown to the minds of humanity, life goes on in the forest. Deep within the heart of this forest this morning, a tiny blade of grass seemed to be tossed by an unseen wind. And as it was tossed for just a fragment of a moment, so subtle and soft was this wind, that the sunlight played against this blade of grass. It cast the smallest of conceivable shadows on a stone that lay just a little bit away from the blade of grass.
All throughout this pathway, Jeshua has used little mini parable symbols. He's used the ocean, he's used lots of them, and he's going to use this symbol of this tiny, tiny shadow cast by this tiny blade of grass in this unseen forest. We're going to get to that, but in the first paragraph, we've all experienced these moments. One of the things that is so difficult that our minds tell us that awakening is something so incredibly out there, and that may be a little my fault because I had one of those experiences, which was my threshold, but Jeshua reminds me that's not the norm. But anyway, the lived experience of awakening, there's a lot of it that's very similar to what you experience now. You just don't recognize it. You don't recognize its divinity. You don't recognize the truth of it, because we've already labeled it as something else, and we don't think to look back at our moment-to-moment experience and go, well, if God is all that is, and I and the Father are one, and this is heaven, then right now I have to be experiencing it. So it's got to be right here, right now. It can't come in the future. So if the truth is true now, well, what am I experiencing in this moment that's true in every moment? And you start to look now rather than looking in the future. And you'll find it, and you'll start to find it. But the thing is, the silence that all of creation arises out of doesn't rise up and announce itself. It is that it is. It's when we become still and stop the effort of looking and seeking. He says, when we're empty, wanting nothing, seeking nothing, merely present as what you are. Because each of you right now would concede that you're present. You all have a sense of I am. But that's usually not enough for us. We want rich after it. We want healthy after it. We want, something after it. We don't simply rest in to the presence which has been present as your entire existence. That seems boring. The mind says, that's boring. There's nothing going on in creation. Silence and stillness, I don't want any of that. Well, maybe a little bit when I'm upset, but I want to have some excitement in my life. So we go to filling everything up rather than resting into that space, because that's where revelation comes. Any of us that have had those kinds of mystical experiences or some kind of experience, they just kind of dawn on you. It's not because you're bearing down really hard looking for them. They almost catch you by surprise because you're just not paying attention. You've kind of let the laser beam focus go and soften, and bam, all of a sudden something happened. That's what's happened to me. I was looking out the window of a little cab in India, not paying any attention, just not really thinking, and it's, well, bammy. So be willing to abide in that space. Abide in that space. It doesn't say visit occasionally, or visit only rarely when in moments of deep distress. It says abide. there. This was his whole parable about build your house on the stone or on the rock. The silence and stillness, your I am present, by the way, has been rock solid your whole existence. But we don't build our house there. We build it on the labels and the judgments and the self-identifications and everything else that we put after it, which, by the way, shift like crazy. I mean, it's like fashion. You know, green's in this year, but 2 years from now, if you're seen in green after the Easter day of the big hats or something, it's like totally out the window. So we don't actually abide in what is stable and solid all the time. And you've all been experiencing it all of your life. All of your lives, if you want to believe in that whole reincarnation thing. He's going to talk about it in this lesson. We have one life. So nonetheless, are you willing to build your house there than on everywhere the thoughts fill in after I am? Because you don't have to think to know I am. I mean, if you sit quietly, if you can actually still your mind, you'll have a sense of being that a thought doesn't need to go, I'm being. I am being. You don't need it. You just are. You see what I mean? But the mind, I mean, I've had people come to me and go, oh my God, my mind is so quiet and so still. And it's because the thoughts are, God, it's so still in here. Wow, it's so quiet in here. It's deafening. I mean, and the thoughts are just running away, talking about the stillness, but we're so predisposed to believe the thoughts that we don't even realize, well, shit, I'm thinking about it. It's not really still if I'm thinking about it. Anyway, so if you'll do that and you'll become to cultivate that quality, it begins to permeate your being. The knowing of I am becomes more important and more prominent in your awareness than all the temporary stuff, the sand that shifts, that we tend to build our house on, our house of identity. And with each breath, and he does a lot of work on the breath work, and we're going to start a Sunday afternoon breath work thing around this pathway. But when you recognize that the truth of creation is silent, still, and empty, when you take in a breath, it's this invisible spirit-like thing. You fill yourself with what seems to be empty. And you let that breath go. Oh, and you can feel this beautiful, sweet stillness before the next breath arises to draw the Spirit in. Anyway, beautiful. So he's going to talk about this little blade of grass. The only thing that separates us from the truth of what we are, he's going to make an analogy that is this tiny, insignificant shadow in a mountain range that nobody's even seen. It's so subtle, so imperceptible that nothing is really there. But that's what your thinking mind is. He's making the analogy of this shadow to the thinking mind that you use to self-identify with. It's really you think to self-deceive yourself. Because the self that you are doesn't need thinking to be. So thinking is an act of big S, self-deception, because you create a separate identity out of it that says I'm me with my story and my history, and here's all my preferences, and here's my exes, and here's the reason that my life sucks in this way, and here's what I'm going to do to get it straightened out, and here's all my spiritual checklists, Course in Miracles done 24 times, Way of Mastery, all this stuff. All of that has to do with this tiny, imperceptible shadow.
No one noticed. The shadow had no effect. The rock didn't even notice. No one on the planet noticed. No one in any of the heavens noticed, except me. I needed something to build a story around. That tiny shadow, cast by a little blade of grass, momentarily wiggling in a wind in some remote forest, has virtually no effect on the turning of the planets, the creation of new suns, and certainly not one trace of effect on how deeply your Father loves you. That little shadow is what you have given power to, and it seems to be able to obstruct the truth within you from being lived. For the moment, you gave that little tiny shadow power, and that very moment, fear was born. And fear is always a contraction away from love. And fear makes you smaller than the blade of grass that momentarily seems to cast a shadow, and therefore obstructs your recognition of the warmth of the sun that bathes you always.
Now, my experience with Jeshua was one of great playfulness and real openness. And I came to him more than once with this I was sure this was really big trauma and this was a really big deal, and I needed his attention and I needed God's attention because I needed some damn answers. And he'd say, oh, well, let me stop. We got to stop all the planets rotating. We got to freeze all the suns in their orbit because this is such a big deal. And he really used it as a symbol that every time I thought something was a big deal, all I needed to do was look around and see that creation was just rolling right along. Maybe creation didn't share my point of view. How about that? But we've wanted it to, haven't we? We've wanted everyone else to share our point of view. We've wanted God to share our point of view, usually about what we think about everybody else. But the point is, nothing that you experience, and this is not happy news for the ego, this is very, nothing that we experience stops creation's infinite movement. None of our small self-righteousness is important. It's a tiny, imperceptible shadow that nobody's noticed. So next time you think you've got a memory of something that you've done that's so bad and so horrific and you know you're going to be judged and condemned for it, what if you remember this little blade of grass? I wonder if anybody even noticed. But me, the ego that's keeping track and keeping its karma mindfuck scorecard going so that you'll end up telling yourself you can't be awake because you've done all these bad things in the past. But anyway, that little shadow, the thoughts that run through your mind, the definitions that you've created, the self-identity that we've given power to. And because we're Christ, for Christ's sake, and we've given that tiny shadow power, we have empowered it with the power that creates all of creation. So no duh, we can make it seem really powerfully real. Because we are Christ and we're imbuing all of these little creations, all these little shadows with enormous power. We're not really doing anything, but we can create such a realistic facsimile that, man, we get lost in it over and over and over. And it's at that moment where we imbued the thought, I'm separate from God. Oh shit! Bam! There was fear born. And now it's like, oh my God, God's going to be mad at us? How do I do? So then we run and hide. Remember the Adam and Eve story? I am ashamed. And then they start, covering up all the private parts. That's what we do with our thoughts. Don't you cover up those private parts and hide them and want no one to see them because you're ashamed of what's there? You're glad to keep it private because if it were known, oh my gosh, that would be the end of your identity, wouldn't it? You'd be embarrassed, humiliated. So all of those are expressions of fear which cascaded us further into the identification with the little shadow. I am separate from God. And off we went. So that fear is the contraction away from love. So here you go. Thought is fear. So when we're thinking, even if we're thinking all these nice thoughts, we attribute them to a private, separate self. And all that thinking is doing is validating this belief that you're the thinker. We did a dialogue, our last dialogue before the break was on this. You're not the stinking thinker. You only think you are. But it's so compelling, it runs us around in a circle. So fear makes you smaller than the blade of grass. I mean, he's trying to get you to realize how small you've taken your infinite self and you've created a self out of it. You took your infinite self that's all of creation, and you created a self that you can't even really see because it's just a bunch of thoughts that run around in your mind. I mean, where are they? Have you ever thought about it? Where am I that is all this thinking? Where is it? But we create an identity around that and we give it a reality. There's nothing to it. Nothing to it whatsoever. And that is what obstructs the recognition of the warmth of the sun, which bathes you always, your perfect union with the Creator, always. 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 If you listen to him on the recording, he really emphasizes always. Not for a second have we been separate, or could ever be.
And when you resist healing, when you struggle to do what we have been observing you here do, learning to speak your truth, when you resist healing in these ways, you may rest assured that something has occurred just prior to that. And it is your decision to believe that the shadow is all-powerful, and that if you heal, if you grow, if you change, if you let Christ live in you, that little blade of grass and the tiny little shadow it creates for a very temporary moment will come and punish you and crush you. And if you can truly take this story into your being and recognize the utter laughability of such a belief, you will never again fear fear. You will never again allow fear to master you and direct the course of your life. You will indeed learn what it means to trust what is birthed in the heart, and you will arise and you will go forth without fear, with no story at all, and you will accomplish whatever creativity wishes to express through you, and the whole while you'll know that of yourself you do nothing, but the Father through you can do anything. Therefore, indeed, what forms of the shadow of that blade of grass are you allowing to run and own and possess your soul? An interesting question.
When you resist healing, how many of us have sought healing? How many of us are still looking for some healing? So, healing is because perfection is. If we're not healed, it's because we're in resistance to what the truth is. Oftentimes, we desire healing of the little self, but healing is the disillusion of the little self. We want to keep the little self, but we want it to be healthy. We want it to be happy and abundant and all these other things. Healing comes in letting go of the little shadow and waking up into your eternal infiniteness. That's where healing happens. Not because we desire it as a separate thing. So when we're seeking healing for the healing of the body, we're completely missing the point. The healing we really need is I need to heal my mind that's convinced I'm the damn shadow. That's the stinking problem. That's what's arising as an expression of fear expressed in the body through sickness. But we want the cause to still be the body, and we want to secretly keep the body as our little temple, but we just want it to feel good all the time. Whew. And he talks about learning to speak your truth. How many of us have trouble speaking our truth? I mean, this is my public forum to get over that. If any of you want to try this sometime, you're welcome to come up here. But you know, the point is, especially if you got on a spiritual path, I'm not sure we know what our damn truth is. You can hardly say a word out of your mouth without some doubt thought arise. Oh, you shouldn't have said that. That's only ego. Before you know it, you got World War III. You know, the shadow has bifurcated itself, and you got shadow wars going on in there. And by the way, is anything being affected by that? No. Does anybody in creation notice? No. But we go on as though we're trying to get creation's attention. We call out to creation for help. Please, come make my shadow wars real and help me here. I mean, sometimes our insanity just really is something else. And it is your decision to believe that the shadow is all powerful. How many of us have not done something because we don't want our mind to attack us? Or we don't want someone else's mind to attack us? I mean, so, not only have we confined ourselves to our shadow, but we cower at the shadows of others. Especially if their blade of grass seems to be bigger than your blade, or smarter than your blade, or more abundant than your blade, or more powerful than your blade, or has more money than your blade. Or you need some of their shadow. So you start that. I mean, it's just crazy what we do. And if you will let Christ live in you, and that little blade of grass will come to punish you. Because it wants you to believe that so that you'll keep Christ out. I mean, you recognize it's always a fear of loss that keeps you from moving ever deeper into awakening. All you're going to lose is the stinking thinking that's fearful. That's all you lose. You lose guilt and you lose fear. Who here really needs those? Anybody? No. So if you can truly take this story into your being and recognize the utter laughability, I mean, really, just look at the thoughts that stream through your consciousness and how you think that is all you are against the infinity of creation. Holy cow! We really do believe that. I know I did. Utter laughability. And we're going to talk a little bit, because he asked us to take this into our being. So when I took it in, he expanded it for me, and I'm going to share some of that with you. And I would encourage you to contemplate it with it. You will indeed learn to trust that which birthed you. You'll learn to trust the I am, because you know what? It never goes anywhere. No matter what your thoughts are doing, you're still there. No matter what the thoughts predict in the future, you're still there. When you start to put all your attention on simply the presence of I am within you, without having to protest how I am it is, just the simple presence of being, you'll come to contact that heart. You'll come to contact the depth of wisdom that is within you. You'll come to connect the voice to the voice for Holy Spirit, or the voice of love, or the voice of God, or your higher power, whatever you want to call it, and you'll begin to hear wisdom which says, the planets aren't slowing down with these thoughts. It's no big deal. Nobody noticed that 30 years ago you said a nasty thing to your mother. Nobody kept track. I mean, you start to hear wisdom that starts to unwind you from that fear. And you will no longer fear fear. Fear isn't the problem. Everyone here has experienced fear in your life, have you not? Wow, what do you know? We're still here. So fear is not the problem. It's that we live in fear of fear about what might happen in the future. So, next time fear comes, just like Neo in the Matrix, bring it, come. Come, all of you, come. 10 minutes later, you'll be eating a bowl of Haagen-Dazs or something. And I mean, not in coping, in the victory that, you know what? All those fear thoughts did nothing. I still exist. What do you know? So don't try and get rid of fear. Fear is just an energy. It exists in the infinite potential of creation. In a lot of situations, if you're out hiking and all of a sudden a black bear shows up, there's a very good use for fear. There's a really good use for fear, and you don't need some enlightened ego going, I shouldn't fear this, I'll just stand. I mean, you should run. There's no fear. So you just run. The point is, fear is not the problem. It's that we've made fear bad, and we've judged it as unworthy of creation, and we push it away. And it's only the shadow that's doing that. Do you think the sun fears fear? No. I mean, you don't see dogs or animals getting together their Armageddon shelters. It's only the little shadow mind of humanity that fears fear. Everything else just goes along, and if there's a moment of fear, well, great. And then you know what? A couple of minutes later, they shake it off, and they're just tooling around again. You know, they don't hold on to it. So it's not fear that's the problem, but be willing to not fear fear. Because we've all survived every attack of fear we've ever had. Every single one. And the whole while you know that of yourself you do nothing. Because if you look deeply within, you'll see I'm not creating presence. I could only attribute creation to everything I would say after I am. You know what I mean? I'm not creating mind, but I create a whole lot of stories within mind. And you'll start to recognize that that presence that you are is the same presence that God is. And that means it's the same present that everyone and everything is. That's why I think they called it the present, because it's a gift given you, not something that you have to create or maintain or be worthy of. It's just given as a bestowal. And that we don't do. That is what the Father is doing. And through that presence, if you want to know, can God do anything? Just look around, for God's sakes. Look around. Do you see the unimaginable abundance of creation? It wasn't, oh, let's just make one tree or one kind of tree. I don't even know how many kinds there are, but there's more than you can count. Let's make one fish. No, how many kinds? The point is, creation is infinitely abundant, and it enjoys creative expression like crazy. So what if we gave up this idea that my shadow has to learn how to do that so that we can show off our shadow to everyone else, and rather just rested in to the presence of God and then see what gets created through us? That was Yeshua's whole thing. These things I have done, you will do and more. Well, we're all incarnate here to see the more. But it won't come because any one of us as body, mind, personalities does anything. It'll be that we give up the story of ourselves, we surrender the idea that we're the shadow, and we just rest into the mystery that is love and is God. And then see the miracles flow. But this is a beautiful question. What forms of shadow of that blade of grass are you allowing to run and own and possess your soul? So just right now, close your eyes, and I'm going to ask that question again, and just allow to arise within you. What forms of the shadow of that tiny blade of grass are you allowing to run and own and possess your soul? Don't think, just watch or listen. Well, some of us are going to need a pad and pen. There's a lot there. The point is, you asked a simple question and then you listened. Love showed you. What if you just asked this question over and over and over until all of those were shown so that you could disidentify with them, you could let them go, and maybe you'd liberate and free your very own soul. So awakening's not hard. It just took a little bit of time and a little bit of willingness. I sat with Jeshua and did this kind of thing for months. Rather than waiting for the universe to create a situation to show you what you were just shown, do you see how easy it was? All you had to do was ask and then be willing to see. It doesn't require that, the universe create all kinds of situations so you can see it. You saw it. Because the universe is calibrated to help you wake up. If you ask that kind of question because you want to release those things to wake up, you're going to get an answer. So, how many of you heard recently about the Voyager spacecraft left the solar system? Well, on the left here, this is a photo that Voyager 1 took as it passed Saturn. And I don't know if you can see, but there's a little, I'll go to the next one. I made it a bigger arrow. That tiny imperceptible blue dot is Earth. When I opened to Jeshua and contemplated this, he said, look at that shadow against the backdrop of infinity. Imperceptible. The one on the right is the earth and the moon beside it. But the point is, do you see how imperceptible the whole shadow of the earth is? The whole concept of our human condition? And we've made that, and then our tiny little shadow within that, the most important thing in all creation. I mean, it's almost inconceivable that we were able to make our infinite self so small. So, are we really giving up anything to let go of our egos? To wake up to our Christ self? I don't think so. But feel free to contemplate this symbol with him and see what you get. It's rich.
There are many forms of that shadow, are there not? There are peers and parents and siblings to please, and there are governments to bow down before. There are mates and children that must come first. There are bills to pay. There are desires to check and keep in order. There are activities and statements and behaviors done by others that require at least 7 or 8 hours a day for you to analyze and judge them to death. This world is exhausting, but somebody has to do it. And you thought it was love that made the world go round? Trust me, love does not spin and get nowhere.
So I love that he's expanded on the shadow so that we wouldn't just confine it to be our thoughts, but he's pointing at all the value that we put on our thoughts and the value that we put on our thoughts about others and the value that we put on the value that thoughts in others are. I mean, if you start to look at it, look how attached you are to what you believe other people think. The truth is you don't really know they think that. But you can get really balled up because you believe you know what they think. And I'll just tell you right now, how many of you have told people that you think something about them when you think something else? So if they come up, they might say, oh, well, what do you think about me? Oh, I just think you're the greatest. And inside you're going, what a fucking schmuck. So just recognize you're prepared to lie to keep your ego alive. So everyone is prepared to lie to you. So why give any validity to anyone's thoughts, expressed or not? Because even if they say it, you have no idea if it's true. I mean, it's all shadow boxing, really. So what if you just gave up completely? Allow everyone to think what they're going to think, because aren't they going to think it anyway? How much control do you exert to try and control what other people think? I mean, you recognize that's ridiculous. I mean, you think your shadow can cast a shadow on someone else's shadow. The point is, set everybody free. They're going to think what they're going to think anyway. What if you didn't care? What if you only worked with trying to release the thoughts that you think are so important? There's great freedom and liberation that comes in that. And he's pointing at some really important ones. He's pointing about the relationship with our parents, which we have given extraordinary value to. He's pointing about siblings. We've all either had sibling rivalries or something with siblings. And that our own mates, our own partners and children must come before this whole awakening thing. I mean, I can't tell you how many couples I've seen, and it's like they're so excited and they're going to wait for each other to like step across the threshold into heaven together. And all of that is just a delay because heaven's right here, right now. All of that's just a mutual agreement that, hey, will you deny with me a little longer? And, oh, yes, I love you so much. I'll deny with you a little longer. And then the stories and the drama goes on. Bills, I mean, he's getting at the whole thing. Because just look at the end of a day, how much, you won't even remember what you analyzed and judged and spent so much time focusing on. But when you lay your head on the pillow, you might just go, Has anything changed? Did all that time and energy spent in thinking and conceiving and judging and evaluating, did it affect anything? The earth's still spinning on its axis just fine. There you lay in your bed. And the other thing is we spend so much time thinking about other people, about what they're thinking about us, but they're just thinking about themselves. They don't have time to think about you. They're doing what you're doing, just thinking about yourself. But the point is, that's getting you nowhere. It's just a space filler to create the belief that I'm this thinker. And it perpetuates its self-existence by just thinking. And if you look, it's not even wise thinking. I mean, it's just completely random. Cindy and I and the kids used to play this game where we'd sit at a restaurant and we would say one word and the next person had to say a word that came to their mind, and then the next person and the next person. If you ever do that, you might just get a couple of friends together. So I would say dog and Cindy would say cat and somebody else would say meow, and it just kind of goes around. You start to see the complete random insanity of the mind. It's just like, how did that connect to that? It's just complete bunk. And if you look closely at your thinking is not even conscious thinking. It's just like a rat chasing a maze. I mean, you see something and it brings up a memory and then it goes here, boom, 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 boom. And it's like you had no idea you needed to think about this, but you were just led unconsciously to completely random thoughts that mean absolutely nothing. So what if you got present in the moment and abided with the I amness rather than running off with all that thinking? I bet you'd get on the pillow and you'd be a whole lot more peaceful. You probably wouldn't be tired. Jeshua says this is what exhausts us, because we take the energy of creation and we miscreate with it, with all these thoughts, thinking like crazy, and that's why we're exhausted at the end of the day. Somebody has to do it. Who said? Who said if you don't fill your mind with all the thoughts that you spend the whole day doing it, that creation is going to be the worse for it? Who said you need to protest everything you see on the news? Who said you need to be the authority on every outfit someone else wears? Why? Why? It's not love that makes the world go round, it's fear. And the only world that goes round is the one that goes round and round and round in your head. And if you all look, you've got this stack of really old 45s that you've played so frequently, you can hardly even hear them now. You just discern them by their scratch and pop pattern. They're so old, but you know what they are. How often do you just sit in silence and welcome the Spirit to drop in a thought that you've never thought before? When I was doing this work with Jeshua, I would say, I don't even know what question to ask. And he says, why don't you ask Spirit? What would be the wisest question for me to ask right now? I don't even have to be smart enough to ask the damn question. That's cool. Because I can't do it. So I would ask that. What's the wisest thing for me to ask now? And an answer would come. And then I'd be like, wow, that's really exciting. I wouldn't have thought about that. I had one drop in today. Let's see if I can remember it. How is it that the non-dimensional consciousness of God creates the hologram of creation? Now, I don't know how many of you drive down the road and something like that just drops in. You recognize we're too busy thinking our thoughts, playing our favorite guilt records, to even be open enough to hear something like that. But that thought drops in because I've cultivated this spaciousness of listening. And it led to this mind-blowing revelation. I was guided to watch this video on the internet, and just mind-shattering, little m mind-shattering. And little m mind-blowing is big M mind-knowing. It leads to your knowledge of yourself when the little mind gets blown, when the shadow kind of disappears for a bit.
Love created you. Love birthed within you as an individual, at least within the dance of time and space, the power to choose, the power to feel, the power to know, the power to channel light and love, and the power to know that something exists within and as you. That's what love has done. And has fear ever created anything remotely like that? So what do you want? Creation or mimicry? Peace or the ability to simply drug yourself with triviality? All power under heaven and earth flowing through you with every breath, so that your consciousness witnesses not what you do as the maker or doer, but that which the divine is doing through you in each moment, so that you get to marvel at the creativity of love, the very same love that moves the sun and the moon and other stars. Now that's a delightful pastime.
Wow. I mean, try that for a week and see if you want to go back to those old records of yours. I mean, would you really just try what he's suggesting here? Giving up this idea that I'm the maker and the doer and that I got to think about more making and more doing, but actually rest back. Heaven is right here. There's so much incredible creativity and light that is being expressed, but we don't notice it. We drive around living these lives dead asleep to the infinite mystery that we're submerged in. But we rarely take the time to pause. And if you do, like with a beautiful sunset or something, it usually doesn't take long for the ego mind to arise and go, "You dumbass, you don't do that enough. You're not present enough. You're not grateful enough." I mean, you see what I mean? I see you nodding your head. You know that pattern. But you just set that aside and you keep going. So love created you. And I mean your aspect of I am. You might have created a story which you have been perpetually editing since you created it. But love created the ability for you to even do that. Love gave you the power to choose. Do you recognize, are you actually using that power of choice about thinking? Usually we're not. We're not consciously using that power. Are you using the power to feel? He said in a couple of lessons before, we have to open to unrestricted feeling. Gosh, if we're using the power to feel, it's I want more of this and less of that, rather than the power of feeling. Did you create that? No, we just created all our judgments about it. And the power to know. And he said it earlier in this pathway, we have one choice. We are the channel for love or fear. That's all we are channels through which creation can express itself. Love or fear. It's like a toggle switch. And some of us go through the day. But that's all we are channels, love or fear. These things are power to choose what that's going to be.
And when your life, this one life, and you only have one life, you might have many bodies, but you will have one life. When you give that one life wholly, what is this called here with the lock, stock, and barrel? When you give it all to being only the presence of love, and if there are any cobwebs in the way of that, let's get on with it and get them swept out of the way. I've got better things to do because the whole of creation is waiting to move through me, and I want to be aware of it. I want my experience, my lived consciousness, to be blissfully absorbed in observing the flow of love through this mystery. You call the body, and dare to call your body, as if you have some right to possess it. Give the body to God. God knows how to use it. You don't. When you are in that place, heaven and earth will move to become your servant. Not until. Send a conflicting message. Nobody shows up for the dance. And when you move into that place, for no other reason than besides that you want it. You will know, because you will be the truth that sets all things free.
One life. I mean, if you truly let into your experience, I'm eternal, what in your life might change? Where you live in your life because you believe this and what you're experiencing is your only life. I want my experience, my lived consciousness to be blissfully absorbed. Blissfully is constant happiness in observing the flow of love through this mystery I once called the body. And then he goes in to stick his finger right in the ego's eye that you call, how dare you call it your body? Like you have a right to possess it. I mean, that's a deeply held sacred thing that we have, that we believe these are ours and we get to choose what we do with them. I mean, that one will hit the ego right between the eye. Might open the third eye up, you see differently. Might welcome that. Blissfully absorbed in observing the flow of love. Not in creating it, not in obstructing it, not in evaluating it, not in judging it, not even doing play-by-play commentary of it. Simply observing it. Blissfully. So give the body to God. God knows how to use it. Send a conflicted message, nobody shows up. But if you get clear and you get right on with love, I don't know, you may have a living room show up, who knows? How love might express itself through you. Because you'll be the truth that sets all things free. You'll be the I am that sees nothing but the I am and doesn't give any reality to any shadows. That's pretty blissful, to not join in somebody's shadow making stuff. And we're not asked to. Love only asks us to allow it. If you want to create a shadow, great, create a shadow. You're not here because you want to create shadows, you want to get rid of it. Blissfully aware, for no other reason than because you want it. Because you've had enough of not being blissfully aware of love. You've had enough fear and you want love. You've had enough effort, you want peace. And all that desire arises within you.
So now you know what the shadow is. Perhaps sometimes you enjoy dancing with it. The great question is, are you going to let the shadow lead, or are you going to lead? When your life becomes that, I'm not speaking of perfection as you would consider this. When your life becomes that motivation, that attitude, that declaration, and that devotion, then perfection will be witnessed through you. For perfection is miracle-mindedness in which that which saved time occurs. And when your life becomes that, when you no longer have any conflicts, what is this word, commitment? When you no longer have any conflicted commitment in your beingness, you will know exactly what the result of my life was for me, because you will be that.
I heard J.M., who's the channel, share an example that when Jeshua started channeling through him, Jeshua had to kind of rifle through his consciousness to see what words he had in his consciousness and what the meanings were. And of course he had to sift through lots and lots of stuff because our consciousness is just packed full to find that which he could use to express. Because imagine if your consciousness left your body and went in another body, but you didn't get to take your stuff with it. You know, you had to use what was there. It's like if you get an apartment and it's already furnished, you kind of got to go, it's what's there. So J.M. or Jeshua kind of chuckles about this all throughout this pathway, kind of poking fun at many of the sayings we have. He mentioned it lock, stock, and barrel earlier. So when your life becomes this motivation, and he says it doesn't have to be perfect, but that you have to turn your attention to the kingdom. You have to turn your attention to love. You have to turn your attention to no longer manifesting, protecting, and defending a shadow. Then love can start to move through you in ways that will save time for others. Dancing with the shadow. Who's danced enough shadow dancing? If you're in a relationship, we do it all the time. I mean, you know, Cindy and I used to dance from one end of the house to the other. So the question is, do you let the shadow lead? And most of us recognize what we've shared here tonight. The shadow's led quite a bit. Or do we, as Christ, as the I am, get back in charge?
Yes, I know what you're worried about. Does that mean that when I get really close, I'm going to have to go through my final initiation of crucifixion? And if I have to do it, will you promise that at least they'll sterilize the nails? Could I choose the day or the hour? I don't like getting up too early. You already know what crucifixion is all about. You've done it to yourself 1,000,000 times in ways far worse than a mere nail driven through the hand that creates a little twinge of pain. Hell is nothing more than the state of being rutted or stuck in the process of crucifying oneself, which is nothing more than the attempt to murder and destroy what God has created out of love. Stop wasting your energy trying to love God. That won't do it for you. Stop wasting so much energy trying to learn how to love another. That won't do it for you. And for God's sake, please refrain from all attempts to get anyone to believe that you love them.
Wow, this is a really rich page. So we all do, and the ego will tell you, oh, death is what awaits in awakening. Death is what's coming. But his whole crucifixion was to prove there is no death. Did we not get that? I mean, wasn't that what the bam, I'm back thing was all about? That there is no death. Give up the whole idea that there's death. But each of us are master crucifiers. And we do it to ourselves. Oh my God, if we even think someone is coming to crucify us, we've already got one hand and the feet nailed. They just have to put the other hand up. We're already so guilty, we've done it to ourselves. And how many times have we picked up the mallet and drove it in on someone else? How many times did we do that to Saddam Hussein, or who knows? Look within your consciousness. How many times have you been the crucifier? When he said, take up your cross and follow me, he was saying, abandon the whole crucifixion thing and follow me into life. You don't have to crucify yourself or anyone else ever again. Skip the crucifixion part was what he meant by take up your cross and follow me. Just follow me into awakening, into eternal life. And you don't have to figure it out because he already did. That's the whole point. He took light into the darkness so that there is no more darkness. We don't have to redo that. We can just wake up to what's already done, what's already been proven, what's already been shown. Stop wasting your energy trying to love God. Ooh, that's an ego favorite. If I just love God more, and if you look at that within your consciousness, there's an energy behind it of, then I'm going to get a prize. If I love God, then I'm going to get the big awakening gift that's going to be mine. And look at that when others, if I love others, there's this real energy of reciprocity, looking for it back. So don't try and love another. How many of us have heard, make no judgments of others? And then the mind goes, I don't know how I could love this, or how I could love that, or how I could love that, or how I could love that. That's all just the ego delaying you. All of that is saying, the ego is trying to say, do the impossible within the thoughts, within the judgment of the ego, which is impossible. It's just a trick. And stop trying to get anyone else to believe you love them. Valentine's Day is screwed now. But how many times, just look at the energy behind a lot of the motives that you do. The mind will tell you that you're loving, but there's this secret desire to manipulate the perception of someone else about you. I mean, everybody wants to be perceived as the nice guy. Well, I don't know about everybody. I can feel out there somebody's like, not me. That's okay. But I mean, the point is, give that whole game up. In the movie War Games, I read this in Jesus speaking to Paul Tuttle in the book Graduation. The only way to win the game is not to play. The only way to wake up is to not play the ego's games, period. And loving God more, loving another more, trying to get people to believe you love them are all part of the game. Your I am is still there. It doesn't say you need to go do that. It's the thinking that tells you that. And by the way, the I am of them is over there just as present, not needing anything. Not needing those roses or those candies or those affirmations or those deep apologies. Wow, we had fun tonight. It's great to be back. After a little bit of stumbling, it felt like it got back in the flow. So next week we're going to continue. We'll finish the deepening of lesson number 7. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Anyone? Anyone? Okay. So I'll do announcements real quick. Love offering. We took a month off. The bills came. So we have a pile of bills. We would really appreciate if you guys wouldn't mind. I mean, when Jeshua said, go and give as I have given, and he said, trust that the angels of Christ will support you. You are those angels. Those watching on TV or who will watch later, please don't think that the other angels have more and they'll give, because that's what all angels who aren't angels yet seem to think. So please, tune into your inner guidance. This is a great opportunity for you to seek some inner guidance. Just tune in. What would love have me share as a love offering? And it may be money, it may not be. If it's a denomination, please don't argue. Please don't evaluate it, just put it in the basket. If you're watching online, you can go to onewhowakes.org, click the Give button in the upper right-hand corner and make your donation there. If you're feeling stuck in your journey and you need someone to believe that you're not stuck, call me. We can have a Skype, or you can come and sit with me. I'm not going to believe your story. I know the truth that you're not a shadow and your shadow is not important. If you want that affirmed, the whole world is out there to affirm you in that. If you want your Christness affirmed, your divinity affirmed, please come. It would be a joy to share with you in that way. I'm so grateful that my brother told me, stop everything that you're doing and come and abide with me in silence. It was a magnificent month, an incredibly filled with revelation I had no idea existed. He comes with me when I do this work. We speak as one voice. Your guides come. All of creation comes in the support of the atonement. I'm deeply grateful to them and deeply grateful to you. We love you with an absolutely infinite love and a perfect peace and a patience that will outlast every last shadow. So if you think you can outdo God, if you think you can outlast God, just throw in the damn towel. And that's it. Peace and a beautiful blessings. Did I mention Sunday? I did mention it in the talk, but I'm not ready to announce it for a formal begin date. But I'll throw a couple other things out. So we're going to do these Sunday events that'll probably alternate between Love's Breath, which is the breathing practice that Jeshua channeled with this pathway, and Radical Inquiry, which is about getting really deep down and doing really deep kind of release work. And then we're also going to do the Beatitudes, one Beatitude at a time. So that's some cool extra stuff that's coming. Oh, okay. So one other thing that happened, and Leslie, by the way, was one of the first guinea pigs. I didn't even realize what was happening. But Jeshua and I join in this thing called channeled listening. There are a lot of channels out there that you can go to and ask your questions, and they'll tell you what they hear or what they sense or what they feel. What Jeshua revealed to me and what Leslie helped me play with, not even knowing we were doing it, is this thing called channeled listening, where I am prompted with questions, but you actually hear the Spirit within. And that's what this is all about, is you finding your own inner voice, not the ego voice, the non-shadow voice, hearing the voice for love speak within you. So anyway, I did that with Leslie. It was great. We had a fabulous time. It was pretty amazing. So anyway, that's coming. That's available if anyone wants to come sit with me. It's not complicated. It's not hard. Don't go create a whole concept around it. But if you have trouble hearing guidance and you'd kind of like to, we'll help create a space in which you can do that.